You know, the interesting thing is that all of these different religions kind of cater to a different mentality. A lot of them are based upon different cultures, and they even bring that out in this book about how there are so many different people from so many different cultures that are not going to accept a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Christ. So for them, we have Muhammad, okay, and there are so many people that are not going to accept any God at all. So for them, we have communism.
Right.
But the thing is, all of these different religions are looking for a coming deliverer at or near the year 2000, and we are so close to the externalization or the revelation of this Antichrist and a lot of his demon entities. But there's something in here. It talks about. Let's see. On page 494 is a really interesting statement. It says, "This attempt to hinder the planned progress constituted a definite menace and indicated a supreme danger. A supreme danger and a problem. The evil forces were closer to success than any of you would ever have imagined." What they're talking about is the First World War, when Germany was on their campaign to take over the world, and how they were stopped by the Allies. It says, "They were so close to success in 1942 that there were 4 months when the members of the spiritual hierarchy had made every possible arrangement to withdraw from human contact for an indefinite and unforeseen period of time. The plans for a closer contact with the evolutionary process in the three worlds and the effort to blend and fuse the two divine centers." Now listen to this. The whole effort during the Second World War was to blend and fuse these two centers, and listen to what they say about it. "The whole effort to blend and fuse the two divine centers, the hierarchy and humanity, into one working, collaborating, and whole seemed doomed to destruction." Now, when I read that, I had to highlight that, because you have to understand what they're talking about here. The whole thing is in coded language. But she says that the main thrust for the New Age is to fuse the hierarchy, or the demonic realm, under the head of Satan, Lucifer, and all the rest of the fallen demons. Their plan is to fuse, through a process of initiation, humanity with the fallen angels. In other words, they want planet Earth to join in league with Satan. They want us to join them in rebellion against God, is what they're basically saying. Interestingly enough, we look at the world wars in 2 stages, World War I and World War II. But all through this book, they talk about the World War, as if there was never any different war. Because they know that the Antichrist is going to be revealed right after major crisis, which they're going to provoke. They talk about how the powers of the United States and the Western countries, the NATO alliance, and the former Warsaw Pact under the former Soviet Union, were both fulfilling the same program, the same New Age program. They're using the old Hegelian dialectic. In other words, you have a thesis, you have an idea, like freedom for everybody, and free enterprise. And then here on the East, you have the antithesis. You have repressive communism and state government control of everything else. And then you have a major confrontation, and then you have the synthesis, a new world religion.
Desired result.
Exactly, the desired result in the first place. And so it talks about how they're using these two major world centers to bring the whole world into a cataclysm, a major war that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and how that's going to set the stage for the appearance of this Antichrist. But it goes on to say that their fusion would have meant the appearance of the kingdom of God on earth. And of course, she's not talking about the kingdom of the God of the Bible, but they're talking about the kingdom of the God of this world, to be Satan. It says the obstacles to this fusion owing to the active tension of the dark forces. Now, the dark forces are you and us. We're the Christians that are praying to their anti-God, you might say. It says the obstacles of this fusion owing to the active tension of the dark forces seemed at that time insuperable. In other words, they seemed to be invincible and unable to overthrow. It says, "We believed that man would go down to defeat owing to his selfishness and his misuse of the principle of free will." And it goes on to talk about how anybody that believes that we should have free and sovereign nations is selfish. The whole book is filled with that kind of rhetoric. But if you just listen to a whole lot of our senators, Al Gore, Bill Clinton, and all the people that are in power, they all subscribe to the same mindset. But it goes on to talk about what their plan is for nuclear energy. And it helps us to analyze what happened a couple of years ago with Kim Il-sung of Korea. Remember, we gave them, the United States and the UN gave them an ultimatum that if they didn't dismantle their nuclear making capability by such a time, that they were going to be dealt with drastically by the United Nations. It came to a point where it was so bad that, after all of our negotiating efforts and all of our political prowess, the only thing we could resort to was to send Jimmy Carter over there. And of course, after we sent Jimmy Carter there, everything was fine. Shortly thereafter, Kim Il-sung died mysteriously. Remember that?
Who?
Kim Il-sung, who was the old dictator of North Korea.
Okay.
That's at the time my brother was still over there in Korea, so it was really interesting. We were kind of in dialogue, back and forth to see what was really happening over there. But it's just interesting that they're taking away the freedom and the nuclear making capability of all these different nations. The United Nations wants 100% of it in their hands, and it's going to tell us why we're here. The release of the energy of the atom is as yet in an extremely embryonic stage. Now, this was written back in somewhere around the time of the First World War, early 40s. And then it says, humanity little knows the extent or the nature of the energies which have been tapped and released. There are many types of atoms constituting the world's substance. Each can release its own type of force. This is one of the secrets which the new age will in time reveal. But a good and sound beginning has been made. I will call your attention to the words, the liberation of energy. It is liberation which is the keynote of the new era, just as it has ever been the keynote of the spiritually oriented aspirant. So it's talking about liberation from any kind of religious, mindset.
Like liberation theology, maybe?
Exactly. Liberation theology is an excellent case in point. Down there in South America. Mm-hmm. All right, South and Central America. But in the process of planetary initiation, humanity has carried its work as the world savior down into the world of substance and has affected those primary units of life of which all forms are made. And of course, it's talking about neutrons, protons, and electrons, and all the different subatomic particles that they've discovered since then. But listen to this. It says, you will now understand the meaning of the words used by so many of you in the second of the great invocations. The hour of service of the saving force has now arrived. Now, they just identified the saving force as the force within the nucleus of the atom. Listen to what they said. They said the hour of service of the saving force. In other words, the hour is about to come for the saving force of the nuclear atom to serve us. Now, of course, that's esoteric language, speaking to people in two different languages, but what is it saying? It says, this saving force is the energy which science has released into the world for the destruction, first of all, of those who continue, if they do, to defy the forces of light working through the United Nations. That's pretty clear. They plan to use atomic energy against those of us who dare to oppose the forces of light working through the United Nations. So now this kind of gives us an idea as to who is really behind this United Nations movement. People like Alice Bailey and her satanic conspirators and her friends there. It says, then as time goes on, this liberated energy will usher in the new civilization, the new and better world, and the finer and more spiritual conditions. The highest dreams of those who love their fellow men can become practical possibilities through the right use of this liberated energy. If the real values are taught, emphasized and applied to daily living, this saving force has now been made available by science, and my earlier prophecy is substantiated. So she keeps talking about a saving force being released. It's really interesting that when you really study the Bible, Christ talked about this, what they call a saving force, but he had different things to say about it. If you read, we're going to get into Revelation 13 for a few minutes, but I just want to point out a couple of verses in Matthew chapter 24, verse 29, that I thought were really interesting in light of that. I'm finding out more and more in my study that God never intended for any previous generation to understand these prophecies except for the generation that was going to witness their fulfillment. Because past generations were trying to analyze the prophecies that talked about 20th century technology when they were living in pretty much primitive times. Right. There's no way they could have understood it. If you don't understand what really happened in Genesis chapter 6 with the fallen angels mating with humanity, at a time when the hierarchy in humanity were almost united, you're never going to be able to make anything out of certain prophecies. If you don't understand what's happening with the space shuttles and all the different technology that we have now, it's impossible to understand some of these prophecies. In Matthew 24:29, he says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. It says the stars will fall from heaven and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. It also says the same thing in Mark chapter 13 and also in Luke chapter 21, but I'm not going to go there right now because those are just two different accounts of the Olivet Discourse that Christ gave before he left this earth. But the interesting thing is that I did a word study on that term heavens, as used in Matthew chapter 24. The root word in the Greek is O-U-R-A-N-O-I. That's the root word for where we get our word for uranium. It's talking about the same thing that we just read about unleashing the power of the saving force, the very life force of the atom.